I don't know. It's just, like, weird comments, but...
Yeah, it's weird because, like, in elementary school, I'd always wanted to be like all the other kids with, like, Lunchables and, like, sandwiches and stuff. And now I think back on it, I'm like, so bland. Like, I would do anything to, like, have my mom, like, pack me, like, all of our culture's food again to school. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how was that growing up in kind of, like, those predominantly white areas, or maybe... because there's a lot of, like, if you watch the first couple episodes of Fresh Off the Boat, right, even though it's commercialized, but still, just you can relate, because a lot of our food has, like, the shrimp paste or the like the fish sauces, right? Of, like, so how did that? Because I mean, to be honest, in Hawaii, like, it's hard to even tell from what culture this food is from, and so. Going back to plantation days, it was literally all of the Asian immigrants that came that created the whole concept of the bento box, at least in Hawaii, of, like, rice from Japan, and then noodles from China, and then there was, like, chicken adobo from Philippines, and then there was, like, Portuguese sausage or whatever it was, right? And it was literally like this. So we have so many Asian identified cultures in Hawaii that we really didn't have that experience of, like, because everyone knew kind of, like, the main Filipino stuff, like the mainstream stuff, like pancit and lumpia and all that stuff, and then most people knew some of the Japanese stuff and Chinese stuff. But I think there was, at least when I was growing up, there wasn't a huge population of, or at that time there wasn't a lot of, like, so I didn't know a lot of Southeast Asian stuff, so, like, Vietnamese or Cambodian, or even when you get into, like, Hmong, right, of, like, what is this, like, culture made of, and or what does this represent, like, how did these people come about, and so what were their struggles, and so, like, we knew kind of, like, the main stuff in Hawaii, but we never had that experience in school because everyone smelled the same thing, right? It was more of the opposite over there. It was like some of the kids who were maybe from military families, or, like, there were some white kids in school that were like, oh, what is that smell? So they were like, they were treated kind of like how a lot of these students here that are part of, we call them students of color, and we're called people of color up here, right, on the mainland is what we call it. And so what was that experience like to grow up in this kind of society where not everyone knows kind of, like, these food smells? I mean, this is food in general, like, because there's a lot of pungent smells and a lot of, like, very strong smells. Did you feel like you were marginalized in school because of that, or did you feel like students didn't want to sit with you because of, like, maybe what your parents had packed you for lunch and all that stuff?
My mom did pack me lunch. So I had, like, regular, like, school lunch. Did you guys have, like, a lot of weebs in high school? Like,
oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
They were, like, I don't know, I had, like, there's these people who are, like, low-key obsessed with, like, the Japanese, like, cute food, and, like,
yeah,
that's not Vietnamese food. We don't cut our
right.
Like, I don't, like, I'm like, I hate to disappoint you, but I don't cut my apple into a bunny. Like,
yeah, like, oh my gosh.
You don't make a panda out of a rice bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I eat it. That's what I do with it.
Literally, before I answer David's question, I have a memory of, like, going to Fubon, which is, like, a giant Asian supermarket in Portland, and they have, like, a bakery in there. I forgot what it's called. I think it's called Mayana Bakery, and there's two obviously kind of weeb people who went into there, and they were so excited. They had, like, cosplay on, like, cameras out, like, they were so they were like, this is so and I was just, like, there with my mom
about like any Asian thing.
I know,
just like, oh my, and I'm like, calm down.
They're like, so cute,
it's 20,
and I was just like,
it's 2020, stop cosplaying in Asian grocery stores.
Yeah, I was like, I'm here with my mom, like, I'm just here, like, Asian people exist. Yeah, I'm just like, if you didn't know, we exist outside of anime. Yeah, but to answer David's question, I think, like, as a kid, I was so embarrassed about the smells on the food, but now I, like, have a sense of pride in it, where I'm just like, y'all are missing out. Like, why should you be, like, so, like, off-put by, like, something, like, such a great flavor that, like, you could just, like, learn to like, / like, get more exposure to, like, different kinds of foods. Yeah.
My mom hates our neighbor. So she like low key like every couple of times she's like threatened to like just like cook fish sauce like outside and just be like, because like this neighbor will call the police on anything, and she's just like, I swear they're gonna call the police on my fish sauce, and I'm gonna like keep doing it until they do.
Wow.
And I'm like,
oh my god, it's like food terrorism. Yeah.
What was the age when you were like, I guess, more comfortable with bringing like your food to school and all?
I think probably like almost the end of high school is when I finally was like, you know what, y'all are just missing out. Like there's so many flavors to try and so much to explore, and it's like there's no reason to like stay on like peanut butter jelly sandwiches forever when there's so much more out there. Yeah, so I have like a lot of pride in it. I'm like, at least I'm tasting more things. Yeah.
Were you guys ever like verbally like at least with like your classmates or people in like high school, like they ever asked about the food, or like were they all just like stayed away? Or
I think there was like I brought like a Chinese like kind of like vegetable stew, and like someone came up to me and it was just stew too. It wasn't even anything like super like out of the or anything. Yeah, so they just like came up to me, they're like, what is that? Like, is that like soup? Like, is that like a dish of like your people? And I was just like, dude, like this is like stew. This is stew. Like this is soup. It's not even super. Like, yeah.
Well, it was funny because in my high school was pretty diverse, and we had a lot of the students there didn't really have money in order to like buy school lunch. So there was this program that was brought in where basically like you could get the school lunch for like super cheap. It was like $1 or something. Lots of students, their parents didn't like had to constantly work, so their parents didn't like take that extra time to try to make them like a homemade lunch of like their whatever culture they come from. But those people who were able to bring like the food of their culture, especially if they were Asian, a lot of people weren't necessarily like, ew, what is that? Because a lot of people were just like, as long as it's Asian food, like it's good. So if people ever walked up to someone, they'd like ask them, can I try this? They would say, can I try this? They might ask like what is in it, but they were always willing to try it. But other people who were either like Ethiopian or who came from like some Middle Eastern or Arabic country, or like even if I brought food, people would always be like, what is that? But they were always kind of like hesitant about it because they didn't know exactly what it was. They thought it was weird what it looked like. So I think even though like Asian food at times, especially like when we were in high school or like younger, people were like, ew, I think now people are starting to be like more, they're a lot more aware of different Asian foods now, and like lots of people do like eating it. So I do think that it's like it's starting to become like more and more appreciated and more liked. And so at least in my high school, and especially because there's lots of different restaurants around my high school too, so people were able to try different Asian foods. The Asian food they were fine with, but like other foods they were like, I don't know what that is. That's at least that's what I saw in my high school.
Yeah, I think we're doing much better, at least within the media. Like we're like having shows or like that, yeah, just we're having shows that display more of like Asian food and becoming more popularized now, like with Two Other Boys, that the Yakult, how it was just popularized like after they saw it on the show, like everybody's just buying Yakult now. And I think even right now too, like with Parasite, everybody's buying like the Chatgeti and the Korean noodles now, and they're trying to make it. Because I visited Rice and Spice the other day, and then I asked the lady that works there, like, oh yeah, that's very popular, everybody's like buying it and stuff now. So like, and like, yeah, like I think media is like in a great place right now where like it's being more popularized and accepted too. So like, yeah, multiple people are trying it and things like that too. So
I think going back to, I guess, the subject of this podcast is like, how do you, so at its current state, how do you feel like you're represented on campus? Like, are there still concerns, like, or I mean, Corvallis in general, right? Of like, do you feel like that's a good representation of you, or what? I think what would your ideal situation be? I mean, granted, we can't charge any department or any university to like, we need this and so we're gonna have it, but I just feel like it doesn't do anybody justice to just complain about it without offering solution. And so I think, do you all have solutions on, or at least some steps that could be taken for you to feel more like some of the food can start to represent who you really are?
I had the question actually similar to that. Basically where, like, because I haven't heard many students outwardly complain about, like, I want something to be changed or different. I've heard lots of students complain about just the food in general here is not good, or like the pho is not good, the curry, all the curry tastes exactly the same.
All has coconut milk in it.
Yeah.
And so more so, like, how would we get students, and especially students who are trying some of these different, like, dishes for the first time, how do we get them to realize, like, this food is not prepared the way that it should be prepared? Or, like, how can we get students to be thinking about your culture is not actually being represented properly with the food that's being made, so that we can get students to the point of thinking, like, well, in a way, like, I should care about this, and how am I going to push towards this becoming a change? Because I especially think that changes are more well made if, like, the students speak out against it, but, like, I haven't seen or, like, heard of any students, like, trying to get together and, like, making a movement. So, like, how would we make students aware of this issue more and actually think that it's an issue and, like, push towards something getting fixed?
So funny that you brought, not funny, but it's interesting that you brought that up, because I have a meeting tomorrow with, so I was approached by the Vietnamese Student Association, and they had some concerns about what was being represented as pho, right? In one of the locations on campus. And what I told them was, the only way that change is going to happen is if students start that. And so the Office of Institutional Diversity actually started from a student speak out back in 2016, I believe, or 2015 or 2016. And so it was from the students, right? The students made that happen, and so President Ray created the Office of Institutional Diversity, hired a chief diversity officer, and that's the reason why we have that office. And so what I said to these students is, like, the only way that change is going to be made is if you as the students come forward and say, we don't feel like this is represented. And I think one of the ways that can spark some change, not really change, it's more of, I think labeling is a huge issue, right? It's like, a lot of the things should be labeled, this is Vietnamese inspired, this is Japanese inspired, this is Filipino inspired. You shouldn't call it Filipino unless you're 100% sure that there is either a Filipino chef, or like you went to the Philippines and you learned it, and you know for sure, like, this is the process of the main thing. Like, you can do fusion. Like, I'm all about fusion, but if you don't understand the concept of the original aspect of it, then what are you fusing? Like, you're just fusing what you're used to and trying to sprinkle in whatever that you think, oh, I can make this Filipino, or I can make this Vietnamese, I can make this Japanese, because I think I know this is what. It's like, sorry, we can't put soy sauce on everything. Like, there's different vehicles to use it, and then what are you combining with that soy sauce? Is it vinegar? Is it sugar? Because it's a totally different dish, right? So I think if it's labeled like Vietnamese inspired noodle dish, I think it wouldn't be such a huge concern. And I think that's what the students actually put in that complaint online, was just, I think you should call this Vietnamese inspired noodle soup. And they had just a lot of concern about, like, this is literally, if you went to a restaurant and ordered this dish, you would not get this. This is totally not what this dish is supposed to be, right?
I feel like that's really sad, though, to have to, like, get to the point where you would just call, this is a Vietnamese-inspired noodle dish. Like, what is that supposed to mean? What is it like, I want to know what it's supposed to taste like,
dish.
you know? So
like,
it's... like you don't want to go in and be like, I want pho, but all I'm gonna get is a Vietnamese-inspired noodle dish. Like,
that tastes
no.
like water.
Yeah, right.
It's like you should have just ordered a cup of water.
I might as well just buy like maruchan or something, a cup noodle, and then just make it myself.
Definitely has sodium in it.
Yeah.
2,000 milligrams.
I think that's
sodium.
how like my mom would describe me. I'm Vietnamese inspired. Not really Vietnamese.
All right.
Actually, can I answer your question before?
Yeah.
Oh,
we
yes,
get-
yes.
I guess in terms of like the question you've asked, at least I don't know if this is true or not, but this is just what I've heard. But that Asian or like that teriyaki place in what how was it? It's in
You're looking at me and I don't know what you're talking
it's
about.
by the where they made that sushi and stuff. It's at
It's
I forgot what it's
Arnold
by the-
Dining Hall.
Arnold Dining Hall.
South Station or Arnold.
Yeah, it was in Arnold. I forgot.
That makes like the katsu and everything.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah, from what I've heard though, because at least when I was a freshman still there and like still going there, I heard like the workers at that place were actually hired like outside, like they weren't like workers, but then they were like they were Japanese and like the university hired them to like open like their own food place within campus. And so like when I was eating there, the food was actually good and like it tasted what it was supposed to be. And I think after I left my sophomore year, like they weren't there anymore, but yet they still kept like the theme of the style of the food. And I guess they knew enough to like how they made the recipes that it still tasted okay, but not as it was before. Like I think something like that would be like if they did that for like if they had like a Filipino like place like that within the university where like they hire like an outside like place to like somewhat make the food as accurate as they can be, and so that people can really get a better taste of what it's supposed to be, other than like the university still trying to like make it themselves from scratch, like without prior knowledge. And I think that would be a great way to like get people to like, at least within the students, to like getting like the food and everything taste better within campus, like that too. But yeah.
So if I was from UHDS and I approached the concerns, like what would be, so I think that idea is great. I think we also need to think about more solution-based stuff. Of like, so if I were approached by any entity on campus of like, so I heard you had this complaint about not being represented on campus, like how do you suggest that we address it? So what would be your response? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I mean that's kind of like, I'm not really about bashing this department, bashing bashing all of this without having some sort of assistance, right? Of like, these are some of the Filipino chefs I know in the area. They're Seattle. Like, is there a way that you could fly these people in to teach your cooks on how to do it? So even if you don't have someone who is Filipino on staff, like what other solutions would you think would be beneficial so that you could at least feel comfortable that okay, they're on the right path of creating this on campus?
I guess in terms of like that, probably more collaboration with like the clubs and like the ethnic clubs here on campus, so that they can have like a better representation of the foods here on campus as well. I don't know what else, but like I think that would
They
be
can even get people from like Portland, right? Because there's restaurants where they actually do make the food like correctly, and they can even get people from like local, or they can even like, there's videos out there and like documentaries where like people explain like how you make certain dishes and things like that. Like they can have them like watch those documentaries, or I don't know, like even if it has to be something simple or easy, just something other than just trying to make it somewhat close to like how you envision what the food would taste like.
So if you, I mean, let's just put a scenario out there, right? So if you caught wind that the restaurants on campus were actually trying to follow, like, so they brought in someone literally at like 4 a.m. to start making the broth, and it still turned out not to your liking, what would your response be to that?
Honestly, I don't know if this will answer your question, but it's almost just like, for me, I was like, why don't you choose something easier to make? like my family, like, the only person in my family is my grandma who can make pho. Like, you know what I mean? I understand how hard it is, you know? And, like, but there's, like, a lot of Vietnamese dishes that are easier to make. You know what I mean? So, like, if you want something that's Vietnamese inspired, choose one of the easier dishes to make that's, you know, I don't know, that's just my opinion. Like,
I think, like, include us in the conversation and consult with us before it's even an issue, and maybe just choose something easier.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't know.
Honestly, I feel like even like, cause alumni like that do graduate here, I feel like if they do open up restaurants or like have connections, like the university holds like a huge connection with alumni too, and so I feel like even like something like that, if they heard that the university is trying to have a better representation of their type of food, that they would be willing to help too. So maybe
collaboration with alumni association.
Yeah.
Like really dig deep within the alumni association. Like, hey, we really see this as a problem on campus, and do you have anyone in your network that can come in and, I mean, we're not asking anyone to follow everything that anyone says, because that's just not realistic. But at the same time, is like, if the effort isn't made, I think you all as students feel like you're not. So I mean, at least for me as well, like if someone puts in going back to my own question, right, of like, I agree that you should probably pick a simpler dish if you can't execute it. But for me, if someone was scheduled at 4 o'clock and consistently starting to make broth, you could definitely tweak that. It's easier to tweak that, but if you're not even doing that work, like if you don't understand that it takes 8 to 10 hours to do a nice broth, especially for pho, like even ramen, like you shouldn't be doing chicken broth base. You should be literally roasting bones, and you need to boil that stuff for a long time. Like that's what good ramen broth is. And so if you're not doing that stuff, if students aren't seeing that, and I've heard a lot of just throughout my career of like, we can't please everyone, but I'm just like, I think that's a cop-out at times, because if you're not making the effort to even be close to that, or to be close to what students who identify that way. So just because we're on a majority campus that maybe isn't API or maybe isn't minorities, right? So we've all been marginalized in our life when you come to the mainland, right? And so you're telling these students and these adults of color that you've been marginalized your whole life, and we can't please everyone, so you're going to be marginalized again with this food, because we don't have the time to research it, we don't have time to execute it correctly, so we're going to feed the majority, and tough. And so I think that mentality, I don't know if that is the mentality, but I just think that people of color in general, I think, especially in this state, if you know the history of the state of Oregon, has been we've already had to endure a lot. And so if you hear that kind of stuff, that really just doesn't help it. Like, don't you want to at least come close to being, okay, like, if you have like, we can accept it, right? We can accept this cuisine, like, okay, I can see how this can identify as pho or as Filipino food, but to not have any students be like, oh yeah, I want to go back there, or like, oh, that was really bad. I mean, that to me is just a red flag of like, why. And if students who come here have to pay for a meal plan, and then and especially if you're Filipino, or if you're Vietnamese, or if you're Japanese, and like, this is what I'm getting, it's not even done correctly, or like, I have no leeway because I'm tied to this meal plan. I have no leeway. I have to spend my own money so I've already paid for this meal plan, but now I have to spend my own money to go outside of the university to buy this cultural food that I want to eat because it's done correctly, right? So I think that's one of the issues that I see with it, is just not having the.
Do you think we have time for one more question?
Yeah, sure, I guess.
Like, I'm just like, before, like, I make it, you know what I mean? Do you think, like, the price matches, like, because, you know, sometimes when you get something and you're like, it was $5, you know? Like, I'm just wondering, do you think the price on campus matches, like, the kind of, like, overall effort that UHDS is putting in their food? Like, I'm just, like, wondering, because sometimes, like, I don't want to, like, you know, buy, like, if something's, like, you know what I mean? Like, if it's kind of just, like, because, you know, like you said, if we do hire someone to come in at 4 a.m., you're going to have to raise the price to accommodate.
I think, I'm not going to speak to, like, what other departments on campus price. I just think that if you're not getting the thing, like, the dish that you want, no matter, I think my barometer that I use is really, what can I get outside of at a restaurant that specializes in this? Is it worth that price? When we work with universities, and so even in my program, right, we're built to charge to cover our expenses, and so that's what most food service does, is that you're paying for the labor of everyone that has to have a impact on this food, and so that, yeah, if someone comes in at 4 a.m., I think it would impact the price as well. But I think if it's not being done correctly, I don't know. Like, I don't know. That's one of those things where inflation comes into play, because all the goods are every year it gets raised, right? And overhead, so you pay for all the electricity and all the gas and all the water, and then your people power, you have to pay all of the workers, right? And so I don't know if there is this sweet spot of price, but I think if you take care of the root of the problem, which is you all don't feel like it's a good representation of your particular identity, then it doesn't really matter how much it is, because you're not going to pay for that, because you don't feel like there's enough effort that went into it that I'm going to pay this amount. Like, so to give you that background of, like, what restaurants have to pay for, so that you have context of that. But if we're going to the root of what this whole podcast is about, is, like, literally, is the effort enough for me to even pay for this stuff that I see? And unfortunately, freshmen don't have a choice, right? Because if you're required to live on campus, and some of these things happen at the dining centers, there is, I think, sorry to add more questions, but so since you all work out of, like, this social justice lens, like, how do you feel about freshmen needing, like, you're required to live on campus, and say you have family that are coming, that are, like, younger than you, that are freshmen, and they have to eat at the dining centers, or they have to spend their own money. So, like, from a social justice lens, like, how does that make you feel, that you already don't feel that the food maybe is not representing you correctly, but now you have to as a freshman? Like, what things pop up in your mind of, like, this is unreal, because I have to eat here because that's what my parents paid for, right? And I'm not getting the same type of cuisine that I'm used to, and so yeah, I'm curious what.
I used to work at UHDS, so I go on I'm on the front desk. So I wasn't even in the food section. I was, like, on the front desk, where I heard all the complaints, like, really going a long rant about the pricing of UHDS and the waste and inefficiency. So, but
for me, like, the first thing that comes to mind with that question is, like, sometimes I feel like choice is often, like, another way to, like, further marginalize people. So I feel like it's just, it almost feels like another, like, marginalization tactic, is, like, not giving us that kind of choice and, like, freedom to choose.
I think there was a group of students that stopped by the APCC that they were trying to get more information, or at least like a poll on, like, if people would pay more money to get food more available at a later time, like, because we have the food to you delivery, like, past 9, right? But even then, like, their thing was, like, students are still hungry past 12 because they close at 12. But then out of, like, I asked them, like, and a couple students in the APCC, like if you guys are willing to, would you even pay more for like a food service beyond that time? And then they said, yeah, like, yeah, definitely. And so I feel like if and going back to like the food pricing too, it's like if I was like able to have a food like the cuisine that I want, and like for it to taste how I want it to taste, and I'd be honestly willing to pay more for that too, and if the university could provide for that. And then again, like I think it's a win-win situation too, because if you have the food that like better represents like the culture and cuisine, like, and the fact that it actually tastes good, people are going to start going there more, right? And like the university and makes more money eventually. So like, I mean, just try, you know, like if you really want it to be successful, I think so. Yeah. That's it.
Okay,
cool.
should we wrap up? Okay, cool. Who wants to do the outro? Okay.
What do you want me to mention?
Maybe just thank David for his time and being here, and yeah, just whatever you want to say.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all that we have for today. Thank you, David, for coming, talking.
You.
My pleasure.
Yeah, telling us about everything that you have an opinion on, everything that you would like changed. I definitely hope that people listen to this and get inspired, or sparks like a discussion within them, their own like thoughts about this.
And even if you guys have opinions too, please like write down and like what you think, like what we could do and on campus, and like, so if you want like changes made on campus, or if your food are like not represented as well, like what you guys think you could do, or how we can tell the university to like make those changes.
Yeah, leave it in the comments, or like VSA, like it was mentioned, VSA was talking about how they would want pho changed or other foods. Contact VSA or contact like the APCC and let us know about anything else that you'd like to see different. But also make sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, our YouTube channel for everything else that we post on there. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Let it be acknowledged that Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon is located within the traditional homelands of the Marys River or Ampinafu Band of Kalapuya.
Following the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855, Kalapuya people were forcibly removed to reservations in western Oregon.
Today, living descendants of these people are a part of the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederate Tribes of the Siletz Indians. The host of this podcast includes paid student employees from the Asian and Pacific Cultural Center. However, all views expressed in this podcast are solely of those of the speaker and do not necessarily represent the opinions of the Asian and Pacific Cultural Center or Oregon State University. This podcast was not subject to prior review or approval of professional staff.